Christ didn't come to start a religion. He came to transform humanity. The world you live in is determined by what you see. The way in front of us now, in this time, in the West in particular, is to have our eyes opened and feel His breathing with your breathing. Hello, my name's Paul Hopkins, and I'm helping people explore spiritual realities in a Christ-centered way, but without the religion. If you like this, subscribe and like the video so more people see it and you get notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to take it further, you might want to explore the community that's linked below that I run. Enjoy the video. I wanted to look at tonight, the title is Mystical Revelation, and really the idea, the reality that Christianity is a revelatory experience. It's not I know it's a hackneyed thing. It's said over and over that it's not a religion, but this is the reality is Christ didn't come to start a religion. He came to transform humanity, which is a bit different, really. It's not a set of rules and whatever. It's actually founded on a supernatural, even if you don't think this is what supernatural is, but a supernatural, mystical encounter that somehow is more real than physicality, than rationality. It transcends that. And in fact, it's the normal way that humanity is meant to operate. In fact, if we go back to the Garden of Eden, that was the kind of option. If you read between the lines, and if you're a Hebrew scholar, you just are meant to spend lifetime pouring into Genesis 1 to 3 because it's the foundation of everything. But they're offered the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. And we could talk for decades on it, certainly a couple of hours. But the reality is, one of the things that hits in that situation is they choose to know right and wrong themselves. There's nothing wrong with that tree. It's a good tree. But they're not supposed to take it at that time in that way, somehow. That's the implication of the story. From then on, God teaches them right and wrong. So it's not a bad thing to know. And He teaches it through their historical experience of them blowing it and then Him restoring them constantly. But there was another option, or there is an option that is there that we are being drawn into, and that is life. And let me plant that in you, because I'll come back to that. That is, what is life? So it's one thing to think that you get life from knowledge. There's another source of life. And I know we could say, the life is Jesus. I mean, that's just the magic answer. Whatever the question, Jesus. But there's more intricacy, there's more depth to it than just saying a name. There's something going on there. And I want to start with this statement, and if you run away, at least maybe you'll remember this and it'll annoy you, and you'll think, oh, I wish Paul hadn't put that. It's like an earworm. I can't get away from it. The world you live in is determined by what you see. So the way you view reality determines how you live in reality. And one person can be seeing one thing and someone else something completely different in the same situation, in the same circumstances. And it will dramatically affect not only your emotional state. So we're not just talking about reaching your maximum potential as a human being, like being effective. No, you will actually engage with a different layer of reality depending on what you've seen. Let me give you an example from the Bible, just so you know I'm a Christian. I'll start with the Bible. And then, it's difficult for Christians to argue if you quote the Bible at them. No, they can disagree with what you say. But this is a story. So 2 Kings chapter 6, one of my favourite stories at the Hebrew Bible, about Elisha, who keeps telling the Israelite king what the Syrians or Assyrians, depending on the translation you've got, are doing, because they are at war with the Israelites. And every time the Syrians come to attack them, Elisha tells the king what's going to happen. So they're there, ready to ambush the Assyrians as they come to attack. And you may well know this story because it gets to a famous thing that I'm sure you've probably heard in many a sermon. And it's the bit where the army works out, or the king of Assyria works out, that Elisha's the problem. That somehow he knows what they're going to do. And his advisors even tell him, this Elisha, man, is a powerful guy. He even knows what you whisper in your bedroom. And they're not stupid guys, these, I would say. We would go, oh, those superstitious people, they're just scared. No, I suspect they had a knowledge that Elisha could do that. He was that sharp. He's been mentored by Elijah, who didn't even die, but took his body with him and left. So there's something extraordinary about his ministry, if you like, the way he operates. So they surround the town and they demand Elisha. Now, here's the thing. Often we contrast these two people. Elisha's servant is terrified. You can just imagine. He pulls back the curtains and there's this army, all these tanks and his AK-47s. I think I've probably got the wrong time frame here. But there's a lot of weaponry and there's a lot of men armoured. It looks bad news. It looks like they're going to die. And he's frightened, as he would be. But Elisha isn't. And it's not like he's going, I'm terrified, but I'm telling myself, God's with me. God's with me. It's okay, God's with me. No, he's just not worried. I mean, we were about to see how much he's not worried, but he's not worried at all. Presumably, he even knew that they were going to come. And so he says to his servant, it's okay, can't you see? And he prays for him for his eyes to be opened. He does some kind of Yahweh Hebrew Kung Fu on his eyes. So his eyes are open to another layer of reality. He's not changed. Nothing has changed. It's the same situation. But now the servant can see something he couldn't see before. He's operating in a different layer of reality, because he can see a whole divine being, what we might call angels, surrounding this army and surrounding the city. So now he no longer is afraid. It's not like he is going, well, we've got an army, but I must believe it. God's with me. God's with me. No, he can see something completely different. And he goes, you can imagine him kind of laughing, like, well, we've won. There's nothing. It's okay. Let's go back to bed. But Elisha, just showing you how bold he is, he walks out of the town in front of the army. You're like, you're looking for me? Here I am. Walks out of the protection of the city, stands in front of them and says, here I am. And he, again, does some Yahweh Hebraic Kung Fu. And they get blinded. Or this whole army is unable to see. And he leads them off to another town. There's a whole backstory to this as to why they go to another town. And instead of killing them all, he offers them McDonald's, gives them a good coating, probably 2 rounds of McDonald's, and then they go home. And they don't return because it's like whatever we do doesn't work, and now they've met Yahweh in their attempt to get Elisha. And what I'm bringing out is that they saw completely different things. The servant and Elisha, that army and Elisha, all the people in the city who would have been terrified. But Elisha saw something different. And I know I'm talking about a Hebraic story of way before Christ, but that's Christianity. It's what you see. I mean, do you see a Middle Eastern man who has a whole load of bad luck and ends up crucified by the Romans? Or are you seeing something else that's extraordinary, that leads to a resurrection? That's the basis of it. So what do you see? And I think people are hungry for this. I'm meeting this more and more. It's growing. People don't just want some kind of set of rules, how to be a good Christian, even a good charismatic Christian. They want to know how to live in a greater reality, how to see it and move within it. So when I go, say, to the bus stop to catch a bus, I'm not just seeing the physical things, but I'm increasingly aware of a greater reality. Not something I'm just creating out of my fantasy world, but reality that actually affects everyone who's getting on that bus, whether they know it or not, because they are probably not seeing it. But how hungry are you to see? Because what you see will determine what you live in. And I totally get it. If some people don't want to grow, I get that. I get just being happy being a Christian. And I just want to be a nice, good Christian. I get that. If that's what you want, you probably wouldn't be on this Zoom if you were like that. Or maybe you're testing the waters. So maybe I want to grow a little bit, as long as it's not too painful. We can be deciding that I don't want to grow anymore, but I think that's very dissatisfying. And I'd suggest one of the primary ways, or the way in front of us now, in this time, in this epoch, in the West in particular, is to have our eyes opened to see. And I don't mean that you become the unusual person who says they see the blue angel in the corner whenever you walk in the room. I mean more than that. I mean, you see, your eyes are open, that are part of your being, that you are designed to use and work with, and you see. If it's like the light is turned on and the room goes from black and white to colour, or there's things in the room that you can now see, and it's not like you have to have a prophecy about everything you see, you're just seeing more. And that information shows you how to live. Another biblical example, I'm sorry, it's a habit. I keep wanting to come back to the Bible. It's strange. But there's some good stories in there. There's the story of Job, for instance. Like, that book is all about not understanding and not seeing. So you see this bit at the start where there's a heavenly courtroom going on, and Satan is going, I can prove that Job doesn't love you, God. Just give me a chance to have a go at him. And God gives him a limited ability to do that, which is a whole nother question that we could explore. But there's a reason for it. But if we park that for a minute, just look at the story. He goes through this horrific time for a long time and has these advisors come, his friends, and they're terrible. They advise him some rubbish stuff. And at the end of it, God shows up and opens his eyes and does not answer all his questions, all his cognitive mental questions, but shows him something. He says, were you there when I laid the foundations of the world? And as he's saying it, it's almost like you're getting a glimpse. It's like God's giving Job a glimpse. Look, I know you're suffering right now, but look at this. I laid the foundation for all of these things, this reality that you're living in. In other words, don't you think I know and I'm involved? And it's like Sure, at the end of the story, it throws in this wonderful Easter egg that Job ends up better off than he was before. But at that moment in time, it's not like he's better off than he was before. He's sitting in the pain, and now his world changes because he can see. And you know what? You need that. You need to know. If you want to grow, you reach barriers to your knowing. It's like the limits of what you understand and why things are working like they are. And you need to break through and see another layer, which enables you to go, aha. Doesn't necessarily mean any change of behavior or situation you just now see. At another layer. Not that you understand everything, but you're understanding enough to see, this is what God's doing. You're seeing. It changes your perspective. This is normal Christianity. This is what I hope at the end of this 40 minutes of me blathering on, you will be like, I want more. And I know, here's the problem. I think in the church we're dying from over-exhortation. I know that. There's too many people encouraging us and telling us to go for it. What we need is practical. How do I do it? How do I live in it? What's the mechanics? What do I do? And I can't possibly equip you on all of that in this 20 minutes, but I can point a doorway and talk about the community that we run, but I can point to a doorway that says, this is where you go. This is where you start. This is what you start to press into. And here's this mystery that I wanted to talk about. Let me explain a mystery. I know you might think, I know what a mystery is. I've watched murder mysteries. I've read an Agatha Christie book. I've seen Hercule Poirot. I know this stuff. No, a mystery, Hebraically, is something that God has within his heart. You almost always has been there since the foundation of creation, hidden within his heart. It's not visible, generally. It's not out there. But then he lets it out for some people to see. So Christ was a mystery. Who he would be and how he would be and the kingdom of God was a mystery. You got glimpses in the Hebrew Bible. They had some understanding, but it was hard to put it together. Certainly they didn't get it, most people. There was only some people, like Isaiah, who asked and entered, who was able to see some things and wrote extraordinary prophetic passages describing what was coming, because he saw. He had glimpses. And how did he get that? How did he access mystery? That is what's in the heart of God. Like, what's in God's heart for you? What are the deep things in? How do you access that stuff? Well, Isaiah asked. He sought. He went for it. He abandoned himself and said, I want that. And it's not about whipping up some kind of more and more energy. I want it more. I want it more. I want it more. I'm going to say it 1,000 times. No, this is activating this hunger that says, I don't want to just stay where I am. I want to move forward. And I'm going to break out of the lie that I can't move forward. The lie that I hear around me that says, no, it doesn't work for you. That's a fantasy realm. It's not for you. Or you're not good enough to get all of that stuff to go, whatever. Speak to the hand. I'm going in. I want to know more. There's this beautiful, I love this verse in Proverbs 25, verse 2, isn't it? Yeah. It says, it's God's glory to hide a matter, and it's a king's glory to find it out. It's the way God works. He hides things in plain sight, but they're right in front of us. He's right in front of us. He's there. But we can't see it and access it unless we do some engineering, some kung fu with our heart and position ourselves to start to hear. And it is not dependent on your ability, your skill, your gifting. It has nothing to do with that. Everyone is capable of this. Everyone is invited in. Adam and Eve represented us all. We're all invited in. We're all invited to the tree of life. And I'll come back to that, as I've said. And you are a king, or a queen, if you like. But it's kind of like there's no gender here. This is royalty. And you're royalty. You're invited in. So, what do you want to experience? Are you prepared to have your world rocked by what you experience and see? Because again, we can pre-program what we're going to see because we love to control things. We love to, right, well, I want to see an angel and it's going to be a certain height and it's going to be golden and it's going to have 2 wings and it's going to come in through that door. I don't think many people would admit to being that specific, but we have a very specific thing that we're prepared to see. What if it's going to be mind-blowing to you and changes things within you? In fact, that's what revelation is. You don't just see something that already fits into how you see things. You see things that stretch you and rebuild you and change you on the inside. I mean, Paul says that we're transformed by our eyes being focused on Christ's glory, and we go from glory to glory. So there's something about looking, we see, and we see things that are like, I never thought, wow, he's bigger than I thought, and poof, it changes you. And your head isn't calculating it all. It's way beyond your head. You see something, poof, and you're opened up, and then again you're opened up. That's living in mystery and revelation. That's why Paul prayed for the Ephesians, that their eyes of their heart would be opened to see, that the spirit of wisdom and revelation upon them, to see the hope that's in front of them. So back to this tree of life to life. What is it? And again, could speak for hours on it. But Jesus is taken into the wilderness in Matthew chapter 4. And Satan tempts him with some interesting things. If you've got all the hyperlinks from the Old Testament, from the Hebrew Bible, you'll know that the temptations are connected to that. So when he's in the wilderness for 40 days, that's such an echo of the Israelites being in the wilderness for 40 years. Because Matthew's message is Jesus is the new Moses. He's the one that Moses talked about that was coming. So he's highlighting that, Matthew. But this is still a true story. So he's 40 days in the wilderness, and the Satan comes to him and says, because he's hungry, not Satan, Jesus, that is. Oh, Satan might be hungry, I don't know, I didn't ask him. And he says, can you turn these stones, or you should turn these stones into bread? Why don't you do it if you're the Son of God? You're hungry? It's logical. You have the power to do it. In fact, I would suggest that's another hyperlink back to Moses, because Moses did, towards the end of his life, stand in front of a rock, and he was told to speak to it so that water would come out, but instead he hits it and he strikes it with his staff, and water still comes out. So he's capable of doing it. but he didn't do it the way that God wanted him to do it. So there'll be a specific reason why God wanted to do it that way, but we haven't got time to unpack that. Water still comes out, but he didn't do it how God had said. And because of his intimacy with Yahweh, that creates a rift, a problem, which gets solved. But there's something goes on there between Moses and God. But everything's all right because he does turn up on the mountain to be with Jesus sometime later. So he's all right. Here's Jesus. He does not speak to the rock, but says, no, it's written, man does not live by... Man's life doesn't come out of what he eats. That's not the source. We have life by what? And here's probably, it's good to go to the Hebrew to draw it out, what he says. If you look at what is being quoted here, he says, we have a source of life by all things. The Hebrew doesn't have the word, all things that flow through the breath of God. That sounds like the garden to me. It just has echoes of God breathing into Adam, of the wind of the day, of a moment in the day where Adam and Eve are close to Yahweh and somehow receiving from him. You see, that's life. That's the tree of life. Eating from the breath, that what's coming through Yahweh, rather than seeking resources that are good and that work, but are not in that flow. Like Satan's suggestion to turn the stones into bread, or Moses' idea to hit the rock rather than speak to it. And that's a crucial thing to you, because here's something that I think many people get tested by. I don't know whether you ever compare yourself to anyone else. It's probably just me. You probably never do that. I'm probably the only one here on this Zoom meeting that ever compares myself to someone else. Well, we don't. I often. But perhaps you could indulge me and listen to me as I talk through, as you counsel me. I am tempted to compare myself and think, oh, they're doing so well. That's exactly what I should be like. I wish I was like that. Is there a way I can get there? How can I imitate them? Or I might go the other way where I go, well, I can't do it, and just give in. Oh, it's beyond me. And we're looking for ways to do things that seem to produce results. And we look at other people's lives and we think they're really successful. And they may well be successful in that realm. But whether they're successful in another realm is another question. It depends on whether they're seeing and doing things from that seeing, which results in their actions. And the thing is, you can have many people who are doing the same thing. Looks like they're getting the same results, but perhaps there's only one or two who are seeing at another level and operating from that. And that's true life. Even though on the surface, the moving and the living and the doing stuff is going to look the same. But the one who sees into other dimensions, which is what Christianity is, who lives in the heavens, other dimensions, then you're going to be living for that. And that is the thing that you go on with. Paul says this strange thing. I mean, I argue with him sometimes. Do you argue with Paul in the Bible? Do you have a good discussion? Paul, come here, let's have a chat. What do you mean here? He says, we came into the world with nothing. I mean, I'm chatting to him about, hold on, Paul. What do you mean you came into the world? Didn't you start in the world? Oh, no, he says you came into the world with the implication that you were already around, but you entered the world with nothing. Well, that's true. You're born with nothing, not even clothes, nothing, totally vulnerable. And then you go out of the world with nothing. So there's nothing material, nothing of physical, or even, I think he's suggesting, worldly human achievement that you take with you. You may have founded a charity and done extraordinary stuff. You may have given to the poor. You may have done all sorts of things that look good. You may have built a company up and provided jobs for thousands. But that, you can't take that with you. What goes with you is what you've built in your heart from what you've seen and the secrets that the mysteries that you've sought from God and then lived in them. So someone on the surface could have had the most miserable life that we would think in terms of how you assess how people do. But they may well be taking riches with them, because where your heart is, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. Your heart and what is etched into it, not stone tablets that Moses had that he decided, or whatever they were, a certain, probably a very special stone, but he smashes them on the floor. But the tablet of your heart, and it's not what is on the surface. So if you go up the layers in the heavens, physicality takes on a different perspective. It's important. It's meaningful. Having a physical body is important. It has a place. There's a reason for that. But as you go up, there's a perspective that increasingly changes, because what is happening in Job, the most important place where reality is and decisions are happening, it's saying at that moment is this courtroom where God is saying to the sons of God, these divine beings, look at Job. And that's where there's deep activity going on that, by the way, affects Job's life. If you have that perspective, like the writer of Job did, and you've got to go, how did he know that? How did the writer of Job know that? Maybe Job told him. Maybe Job wrote it down. It doesn't say, but he has that perspective. And it totally changes the story. If you take those two chapters out, and if you take the end off, it's an utterly bleak story. But if you've got those bits, you see perspective. And you were designed for that. You were designed to live in and from the heavens and seeing and making choices that would sometimes seem weird to some people because you're seeing something else. And of course, you're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all grow. But you're called, that's what Christianity is to see things in the heavens and live from them. Even if you're doing the same things physically that you would do if you weren't seeing them. Because life comes from what is flowing out of God. When you see him and you're with him and you're in his house, in his world, as Jesus said, I go to the Father's house to prepare a place for you. There's realms and places prepared for you guys to move in. And that's the greater reality. And I think that's what you're probably hungering for. That's what you want. That's what will deeply satisfy us. To see and enter the Father's world through Christ and see things as he sees them and hear his heart breathing out into you. Well, is it possible for you to live like this? It must be. It must be. How about, instead of responding to all past failure as if it grips you, and your current situation as if it grips you, and everything that would oppose you living like that, what if you took all that, like kind of held it in your hands, that whole fizz of energies that would say, "Oh, you don't know enough. You need to know more. You've failed in the past. You don't know the right stuff. You're not that loved by God." All of that fizz of junk. Hold it there. And even push it. And why don't you do this now? In your imagination. I mean, use your hands. I do. And take it and push it further in front of you. So it's further from you than it was before. And look at it. Because here's a greater reality. All that you have is this moment, right now. None of that counts. It's a record of wrongs. And none of it actually counts in your now, which is love, which keeps no record of wrongs. It doesn't have a law speaking to it of wrongs and what you did in the past and fears of the future. It's a now. Here it is. We're in the now, momentarily, crazily, forget everything else, and feel his breathing with your breathing. He breathed into you life. He gave you physical and soul life. And he's with you. And nothing can change that. It's too late. He's with you. So for a moment, just a moment, go crazy and realize how so loved you are and how small this world is compared to that and his realms that he's called you to live in, the kingdom of God. Shavlobokusta. Just hold that for a minute. What if you were a king? What if you are a king? And you are Lord over life itself in him. Right now I ask for our eyes to open, to see, to be stretched, our capacity stretch, to see and feel. Christ didn't come to start a religion. He came to make a new humanity, a new world. And Paul says this, if any man is in Christ, he's a new world. if anyone, if any woman is in Christ, they're a new world. They are a new creation. It started again. A different world that overwhelms the old world. And that's coming. That's inevitable. Kamoyedana. Maybe I'll shut up at this point and I'll just see if does anyone want to say something or ask a question. And if you, I think you can put your hand up or say something on Zoom. I don't know how it works. I'm still learning myself, and I've only been using it for 2 years. Nancy, is that a question? You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes. I just wanted to say, Paul, that it's refreshing to me to hear you because, I'm not a theologian, so I can't say I know a lot. But it encourages me because one of the things that I find in the body generally is that the body often tells us, they don't mean to, but they basically tell us if you really work harder, if you really concentrate or perhaps take this course, then you can be elevated enough to understand God, which is, I believe, what is blessing me about what you're saying is that that's not the case. The case is, as we love God, as we let him come into more areas of our heart, and there are lovely people here. I just sense it. I sense there's just incredible people here. And they've been taught you have to understand something. No, I don't understand half the experiences I have with the Lord, and that's what I love what you just said about as we follow him. You have this experience and you think, whoa. I don't think, for example, just for an example, for other people to be encouraged, I have an angel as one of my bodyguards. He's probably about 20 feet tall, and he's a bear, and he's green. He has greenish brown fur. I look good in olive green, so perhaps that's why he's that way. But it bothered me at the beginning as God showed me this angel. Is this okay? Is this legal?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I think that's what God wants us to enjoy, and I love what you've spoken about tonight. Paul, it's just all about if you love God, he's going to give all of you, everyone who's here, experiences that you probably can't talk to your neighbor about because it's just too bizarre. But it doesn't matter because what you're really saying is, Elijah, Moses, all these people had experiences. Some of them were good. Moses blew it with the hitting of the rock the second time, but it doesn't matter. And I'm so blessed, Paul, by what you had to say. It just really encourages me. Thank you very much.
Oh, thanks, Nancy. Good to have you here. It's good to see you again.
It's great to be here.
Anyone else want to say anything? It's the Zoom paralysis. No, I didn't come to say anything. And just enjoy the presence. I love what you said, Nancy, about is it legal? It's like, it's funny, isn't it, that we would think there's certain things allowed and not allowed in our culture, in our church cultures, when it's absolutely, the scriptures are just bizarre what happens. like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob on their journeys, and they meet a camp of angels having a party next to them, and they meet another bunch of 3 people turn up, and one of them seems to use the name Yahweh and talk to them about and then 2 guys go to Lot and in Sodom and Gomorrah and blind everyone. I mean, yeah, that's normal, isn't it? I mean, that's normal happenings. So I can. Here's one of my stories that blew me away when I was starting to get rewired by God in many ways. Was I was sitting praying one night. I'd learned to pray into the night. I was particularly practicing tongues and learning what that was and what it was to speak from the revelatory, the dream state part of you, which is where tongues comes from. And I'm learning to engage with it. And I've been praying for about an hour and a half, and allowing tongues to be changed through me. And I was getting all excited, and totally unexpectedly, a Chinese man walked through the wall and started to speak to me. Now, I know it wasn't physical, but I'd so activated my seeing, my inner eye seeing, that it was actually shocking when he walked through the wall. It was so bang in my face. It was as if someone had walked physically into the room, because I went, hello? What do you do? Of course, I don't know he's Chinese at this point, and I can't even be sure he was Chinese, but he started to speak to me. He said, hello, and he started to speak to me in English with a Chinese accent. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, who would have been expecting that? So for the next, it couldn't have been long, but it felt like long. For the next probably 10 minutes, it could have been longer, could have even have been less, because time just changes in these situations, doesn't it? And he just taught me. He said, I've come to tell you this. And he just started to it was like the best sermon I'd ever heard in my life. It was incredible revelatory stuff. At that point, I'm thinking, whoa! And I remember thinking in the middle of it, oh my goodness, I'm going to forget this. I wish I could. He's talking so fast. I can't write this down. I haven't got anything to write it down in front of me. And I'm trying my best to sort of gulp it all in. Extraordinary stuff, explaining things to me that I'd been asking, and joining up scriptures that I'd never thought to join up, and saying how reality worked, and talking to me about Melchizedek and about the blue, the stone, the sapphire sea, explaining stuff to me. And I'm like, and then at the end, after 10 minutes, he said, right, I go now. And he was just about to go through the wall, and I said, whoa, stop! Who are you? And he said, oh, I'm a teacher. And this is what I do. And he left. And that was one of the most profound moments, because it was like in that moment I thought, oh my goodness, there are people that travel the world and teach to whoever's open, whoever's at the point where they could handle this enough. I mean, I couldn't handle it, but I could handle it enough to receive it. And then I thought, my goodness, that means I could do that. I could be in this bedroom here and I could go around the world and teach. It opened a whole new world up to me. Now, I'm not talking to anyone about this at this time. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I wouldn't tell anyone, but they'd think I was crazy anyway. But I spent about half an hour trying to write down what I could remember of what he'd said. Extraordinary stuff. And I only got a fraction. But that seeing then, more than what he said, that experience opened something up for me. It wasn't long after that I started to find myself in my dreams in other places, speaking to people and doing things. I found you've probably heard I don't tell all the stories. I've told the first experience I had, but I don't so often tell all the other stories because there's no need. But I remember once I was in a war zone and I couldn't work out where it was. It's in this dream, suddenly in a war zone. And it was, again, one of the most vivid, real dreams you've ever experienced. Like, oh my goodness, am I here or what is this? So I was still learning this stuff. And I was thinking, well, if this is a dream where something happens, what am I supposed to do? And at that moment, I noticed this woman who's got 3 young children, like very young, and she's trying to get out of over a wall, and there's bullets flying everywhere. And she can't lift all her kids up. So I say, hey, can I help? And she gives me one of her kids, and I lift the kid over the wall, and we're doing this chain, and I pass the 3 over, then we get over the wall, I help her over the wall, and I'm just about to run with her across, and as I get over the wall, I fell over. So it's possible to be very incompetent, even in the middle of it. So I fall over, and bang, I wake up. And if I hadn't have had that experience with the Chinese man or the other dreams that I'd had at this point, I would think this was just a dream. This was just, it wasn't actually real, except I actually had a sore ankle when I woke up. And I suddenly thought, could it be that when we have these disasters around the world, that many people are rescued? We hear about the people that die, but we rarely hear the stories of rescue. I mean, that's not news, is it? It's just and they probably wouldn't know. It's just, and we have stories. When I worked for a missionary agency, we had stories, extraordinary stories in war situations of people being rescued by what you could only end up concluding was a divine being, an angel had intervened. But a shift went on in my mind because I could now see something, that this is real. And if you think about it, why wouldn't that be real? If Elijah could go from mountain to mountain and kingdom to kingdom, establishing kings, and the prophet bands that were with the band that was with him, when Elisha says, he's gone into the heavens, they say, no, let's search all the mountains, because he often just disappears and reappears on a mountain. And he reappears in front of a king's servant at one point and shocks the guy. That's, instead of it being a great story that we get all wow, that's amazing. What if that is normal? What if that is actually how reality works? At one level. There's probably higher levels, because you can be at multiple places at once, I suspect, frequently. But I come back to what I first said. You can only live in what you've seen. And I'm sure for the disciples, mind-blowing that it must have been, terrifying that it must have been to be with Jesus at times. We laugh at the stories, but it must have been terrifying when he was on the water in the storm, and they were convinced he was a spirit of a dead person coming to get them. Probably because that's what happens before you sink. They suspect the dead people come to get you. So they're going, there's a dead person and it's Jesus. So, or you could stay in the safe Western world, where everything is kind of scientifically predictable and some things are just random, like the weather. So there endeth the story for tonight. And I don't want to keep blathering on beyond the hour. Your time is precious, and I'd rather that you went away going, well, he's freaky, that guy, Paul, but not that freaky. Hopefully you'll go away from this session with a little bit of hunger of like, yeah, I want to be wild, not for the sake of being wild, but because that's normal. So in other words, I want to be normal. What is stopping me being normal? God isn't religious. He never was. He never will be. He's always out of any box that we put around him. And we can have all sorts of barriers like fear of the supernatural, that anything supernatural is demonic. When you're reading the wrong Bible, if you think that. It's full. It's the real Bible is full of stuff that is absolutely crazy. So some people are writing writing in the messages. Kay, are you saying you want to say something? Is that what you're saying? Still no micro? Is that it?
No, she doesn't have a microphone.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, I'm just glancing at what you're saying, Kay. Yeah, creatures, like meeting, like Nancy talking about an olive green. Did you say a furry thing? An olive green, furry. We only have one word in church culture. It's called an angel. But there's obviously clearly many types of heavenly being, different, that look different, that have different ways. It's way wilder than we would think. So we need to see. So maybe let's try this. I'm gonna finish with this. Oh, a green bear. Okay. Put your hands on your eyes like this. Hopefully you can still see me through your hand. But if you can't, and you haven't learned that skill yet, put your hands and let's go. Holy Spirit, you're brilliant at this. You know how to open our eyes. We've had our physical eyes open since birth. But would you open our inner eyes even more? We're prepared to see reality more as it is than we have done before. Do it, Lord.